Well, what a turnaround, you can definitely say, when it comes to our lacrosse team. Maybe along the lines of history repeat itself. And do the Calgary Roughnecks, do they actually want me to go to the game as a season ticket holder? You know what I mean? As it's time for another episode of... Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome back to another episode of my Calgary Roughnecks this month. Here we're up to Season 3, Episode number 6, as we're going to talk about and recap how April went for the Calgary Roughnecks, and I'm going to probably say you might want to grab your favorite drink and beverage for this episode, because it was definitely a very, very jam-packed month, as a couple of postponed games got scheduled in this month. So there's going to be 6 games that we're going to talk about. 6, which is essentially a third of a regular season. But the Calgary Roughnecks, they were looking so-so at best up to this point. And then we'll get to the question of, I'm a season ticket holder. However, I missed a bunch of games, and I gotta wonder, do they want me to keep going to the games as a season ticket holder, as we'll touch upon on this episode. So anyway, before we get into notes and recap how April went, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home of the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, Stampeders, and the Calgary FC, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, as I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, recapping games and stories and that, but I also do a variety of non-sports content, which I have time, which I haven't had much of. I do have personal vlogs, attempt at comedy, do have share my experience on the road, or at a sporting event, and I have some vlogging to go, so if it all sounds like be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey. You know what you do. Just make sure you like, subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below, but I'm going to say how this month turned out. It's kind of feeling similar to 3 years ago, just how the team just seemed to limp through the season, but have turned it on, but we'll see how things played out and how things shut down at the end of the regular season. So Game 13, this is the start of the long game recap. This happened on Friday, April 1st, as the Calgary Roughnecks, they were hosting the Vancouver Warriors. This was a 7 p.m. ball drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. I did not attend this game personally, as I was just feeling out of it and busy, so I did not go to this game. But the Calgary Roughnecks, they were 1-3 on games that I sat home, so or went to the game, and they won that one game earlier in the season that I was away. So how did things go for the Calgary Roughnecks in this game? Well, actually Calgary did get off to a fast start, as it was Hayden Dixon who scored at 2:24 to make it 1-0 for Calgary. Logan Schuss tied it up for Vancouver at 3:40 to make it 1-1, and then Calgary scored the next 3 goals in the first quarter, as it was Curtis Superman Dixon on a power play at 6:22 to make it 2-1 for Calgary. And then Zach Hayward scored at 6:59 to make it 3-1. And Jesse Ging had a power play goal at 10:35 to make it 4-1. So it was 4-1 for Calgary after the first quarter. Second quarter, things tightened up a little bit for Vancouver as they got into it. First, it was Dan Taylor that scored for Calgary at 1:06. That made it 5-1 at that point in the second quarter. And then Vancouver scored the next 3 goals. It was Dinsdale who got Vancouver around 5-2 at 7:33. And then Bowering scored at 8:09. So that made it 5-3 for Calgary. And then Chambliss scored for Vancouver at 10:49 to make it 5-4 for Vancouver. So finally Vancouver is making a game of it. However, Curtis Superman Dixon scored the last goal of the first half at 11:42 of the second quarter. So we had a 6-4 game Calgary at halftime. Going to the third quarter, well, Hayden Dixon scored the first goal for Calgary at 2:24 to make it 7-4 for Calgary at that point. However, Vancouver definitely struck about the midway point of the quarter. First, it was Logan Schuss at 7:10, so that made it 7-5 for Calgary. And then Keegan Ball scored the next two goals for Vancouver at 8:03 and 8:53. So we had a 7-7 game, and that was all the scoring, so it was 7-7. Going into the fourth quarter. Going to the fourth quarter, Vancouver took their first lead of the game, as Killam got the goal, but it wasn't until 8:36 of the fourth quarter, so it was 7-7 for half of the fourth quarter. So it was 8-7 for Vancouver at that point. However, Tyler Pace did tie it up for Calgary at 9:25 at 8 apiece, and then Curtis Subban Dixon at 9:53 keep Calgary a lead at 9-8. However, Dinsdale scored for Vancouver at 10:49 to make it 9-9, and then there was no more scoring at that point. So I was going to say this one needed overtime. In overtime, it was Curtis Subban Dixon that scored 31 seconds in. So Calgary wound up winning this one with a thriller, 10-9 in overtime. Too bad I missed that game, but circumstances got into the way. So Calgary started off April with a win by winning 10-9. When it comes to shots on goal, Vancouver had a slight edge, 46-45. So leading the way for the goal scorers, well, Keegan Ball had 2 goals for Vancouver, while Curtis Subban Dixon had 4 goals for Calgary. When it comes to assists, it was Adam Chamberlain who got 3 for Vancouver, while Jesse King had 5 for Calgary. Loose balls, Reed Darling had 8 for Vancouver, while Zach Currier had 15 for Calgary. And then saves, it was Alex Book who had 35 for Vancouver, while Christian Del Bianco had 37 for Calgary. Cost turnovers, Reed Bowering had 3 for Vancouver, while Reese Kelly's had 4 for Calgary. So ultimately, Calgary was 2-0 on games that I missed. I'm starting to see a trend here early, but it's just weird how it worked out that way. But still nice to see that they win. By the way, as I mentioned, Curtis Dixon had 4 goals, 1 assist for 5 points, and Jesse King had 1 goal, 5 assists for 6 points. And then the Warriors, Logan Schuss had 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points, as well as Keegan Ball. So that was game number 13, as the Calgary Roughnecks defeated the Vancouver Warriors 10-9 in overtime. So game 14, this happened the next Friday, on Friday, April the 8th, as the Calgary Roughnecks were hosting the Halifax Thunderbirds. This was an 8 p.m. ball drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. This game was originally rescheduled from Thursday, December 30th, and then I had some stuff happening early the next morning, so guess what? I missed that game too. So I missed the East Coast Kitchen Party on this one. Did that help the Calgary Roughnecks or not? Well, going into this game, the Halifax Thunderbirds did actually open up with 2 quick goals, so far, no. As it was Peterson who scored the first goal for Halifax at 2:35 to make it 1-0. And then Jameson scored at 3:35, so Halifax had a 2-0 lead fairly early in this game. However, Calgary did score the next 2 goals, as it was Dan Taylor got Calgary on the board at 7:37, so that made it 2-1 for Halifax. And then Jesse King tied it up at 2 apiece at 9:45, so we had 2-2 game at that point in the first quarter. However, Sean Evans, former Roughneck, did score for Halifax at 10:12 to make it 3-2 for Halifax. However, Tyler Pace got a power play goal at 11:32 to make it 3-3. So we had a 3-3 game going into the second period. And then going into our second quarter period, whatever you want to call it. So going in the second quarter, Jesse King scored for Calgary at 2:07 to give Calgary its first lead at 4-3 at that point. And then Tanner Cook made it 5-3 at 4:43. However, the Thunderbirds answered back with 2 goals of their own to tie it up 5. Jameson at 5:02 made it 5-4, and Theodore at 6:29. So we had a 5-5 game at that point in the second quarter. However, Dan Taylor did give Calgary a lead going into halftime as he scored at 11:45. So it was 6-5 for Calgary at halftime. Then in the third quarter, ultimately, the Calgary Roughnecks did slowly pull away from the Halifax Thunderbirds. First, it was Shane Simpson, 59 seconds in, to make it 7-5 for Calgary. And then Curtis Dixon, I meant to say, Superman at 2:08, made it 8-5 for Calgary. And then Tanner Crook at 2:55, made it 9-5 for Calgary before final for the Thunderbirds got their first goal of the third quarter at 4:14. So we had a 9-6 game at that point. And then Dan Taylor scored at 6:48, so that made it 10-6 for Calgary. And then Keane scored for Keane got the Halifax within 3 to make it 10-7. This happened at 7:56. Then the last goal of the third quarter happened at 9:38 on a power play, as it was by Dan Taylor. So it was 11-7 for Calgary at that point. So Calgary led 11-7 going into the fourth quarter. Well, in the fourth quarter, it was Theodore again on the power play, scoring for Halifax at 4:27. So that made it 11-8 for Calgary at that point. However, Calgary was able to eventually pull away in a couple goals in a couple minutes. It was Zach Currier at 7:27 to make it 12-6. And then Curtis Superman Dixon scored the last goal of the game at a 9:11 to make it 13-9. Or 13-8, I meant to say. So ultimately, actually the Calgary Roughnecks, they won this one 13-9. 13-8. I keep saying 9 for some reason. 13-8. You know, they looked like the Thunderbirds played a little more aggressive. Took a few more penalties, so Calgary now 3-0 when I miss a game. I'm starting to see a trend here. Calgary's actually also getting themselves back in the conversation in terms of a playoff spot. So I guess doing my part add that way, I guess, but it's just how the schedule and circumstances played out. So the game leaders for this one was Cody Jameson had 2 goals for Halifax, while it was Dan Taylor who had 4 goals for Calgary. When it comes to assists, Chris Boucher, another former Roughneck, he had 4 assists for Halifax, while Jesse King had 6 for Calgary. Loose balls, it was Graham Hosak who had 10 for Halifax, while Zach Currier had 18 for Calgary. When it comes to saves, it was Oren Hill who had 34 for Halifax, while Christian El Bianco had 46 for Calgary, so he definitely was huge. Cause turnover was Jack Withers who had 3 for Halifax, while Zach Currier had 4 for Calgary. Because the shots in this game, it was shots and goal was I'm gonna find it here for a sec. It was 54-49 for Halifax. So Halifax had the slight edge in play, but ultimately Calgary won the game. Jesse King definitely was the big point getter. He had 2 goals, 6 assists for 8 points, and then Dan Taylor had the 4 goals. I remember Jesse King. He was a big player that we acquired in 2019 from the Georgia Swarm, and it's definitely been one of the big parts of the Calgary Roughnecks since then. And then Boucher was the only lead point getter for Halifax with 4 assists. And then Sean Evans, 1 goal, 3 assists for Evans. So it took former Roughnecks for their leaders in that one. So that was game number 14. As Calgary started off April, now 2-0. So game 15, this happened the next night on Saturday, April the 19th, as the Calgary Roughnecks were taking on the Panther City Lacrosse. This was the new team that's based out of Fort Worth, Texas. This was a 7 p.m. ball drop at Scotiabank Seldom after a busy day, and I was still feeling so-so from being a little sick in the winter. Guess what? I also missed this game. But did that affect the Roughnecks positively or negatively? I think you kind of see where this is going. Well, the Calgary Roughnecks definitely made some history in this one, as the Calgary Roughnecks did open up the scoring early in this one at 4:41 the first quarter, as I was tired pace. Made it 1-0 for Calgary at that point. And then Curtis Superman Dixon scored at 4:55 to make it 2-0 for Calgary. And then Zach Currier made it 3-0 at 6:44. So it was 3-0 for Calgary at that point. Panther City's first goal did not come until 14:26 of the first quarter, as it was 3-1 for Calgary at that point. Second quarter, Calgary really blew this one out of the water for Panther City. Well, actually, Panther City did score the first goal of the second quarter, 39 seconds in, to make it 3-2 for Calgary at that point. However, Calgary did score 7 straight in the second quarter before halftime. First, there's rescheduled at 3:53, so that made it 4-2. First, Superman Dixon at 4:49 made it 5-2 for Calgary. And then Curtis Superman Dixon again. He scored at 7:19 to make it 6-2 for Calgary. And then Curtis Superman Dixon again scored at 9:37 to get the hat trick to make it 7-2. And then Jesse King at 11:02. That made it 8-2 for Calgary. And then Curtis Superman Dixon got his 4th goal of the quarter at 12:51. That made it 9-2 for Calgary. And then Jesse King scored the last goal of the second quarter for halftime at 13:25 to make it 10-2 for Calgary. So yeah, Calgary had a 10-2 lead at halftime. Going into the third quarter, more Calgary offense, as Calgary went on and scored 3 more goals. So if you count the 7 straight in the second quarter, they have scored 10 straight goals. So as Calgary had 3 goals in the third quarter, Tyler Pace scored at minute 20 to make it 11-2. Zach Haywars at 7:03 made it 12-2. And then Dan Taylor made it 13-2 at 11:56. That was all the scoring in the third quarter. So Calgary scored 10 straight goals. They actually scored 1 more to make for good measure. So Calgary scored 11 straight goals. As in the fourth quarter, the next goal did not happen until the 6:35 minute mark on the power play, as Curtis Superman Dixon got his 5th of the game, so they made it 14-2 for Calgary at that point. However, the Panther City Cross, they make it just a little closer by scoring 2 more, as it was Caputo who scored at 7:12 of the fourth quarter to make it 14-3. So that was Panther City's first goal since the 39-second mark of the second quarter. So they've gone 2.5 quarters without scoring a goal. And then Farrell got a power play goal at 9:31. So that made it 14-4. So ultimately, the Calgary Roughnecks, they destroyed the Panther City Cross 14-4. And actually that tied the franchise record for fewest goals allowed. So Panther City, definitely, they were definitely dominated by my Calgary Roughnecks without me being in the stands in this one. And obviously, the game leaders, well, first, if you look at the shots, it was 48-38 for Calgary. This one, game leaders, well, Cam Milligan only had a goal for Panther City. I guess you could have picked anyone out of Panther City and say he led the team in scoring. Curtis Superman Dixon actually had the sock trick. You understand it's called a sock trick when you score 6 goals in a game. He had 6 assists. Patrick Dodds had 2 for Panther City, while Jesse King had 4 for Calgary. Loose balls, Matt Hosbach had 8 for Panther City, while Zach Currier had 11 for Calgary. Saves, Kevin Olerman had 21 for Panther City, while Christian Del Bianco, he only needed to make 29 in the game. Cost turnovers, Matt Horsack had 3, while Zach Currier had 5. So yeah, looking at the point total, Curtis Superman Dixon led the way with 6 goals, 1 assist for 7 points, and Jesse King with 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points. Basically, Curtis Dixon and Jesse King are our 2 top point getters for the Calgary Roughnecks. So yeah, Calgary's won 3 straight in April, especially that busy stretch of 3 games in 8 days. Wonderful NLL schedule at times where you don't have a game for a couple months and then suddenly you get boom, 3 games in 8 nights. However, 1 game was postponed. So that was game number 15. So Game 16, this happened on Saturday, April the 16th, as the Calgary Roughnecks went on the road, as they were taking on the Vancouver Warriors. This was at the Langley Event Center, and actually this win that the Calgary, well, I kind of spoiled it already, but this game actually also set some history for the Calgary Roughnecks. They did ultimately win this game, but let's get to the summary first. How did Calgary do after destroying Panther City? And yes, I was not at this game, but it was in Vancouver, so... Anyway, going into the first quarter, the first goal of the game did not happen until 7:59, as it was Tyler Pace scored, so make it 1-0 for Calgary. And then Bowering tied it up for Vancouver at 9:22, so it was 1-1 at that point. And then Dan Taylor scored for Calgary at 10:14, so that made it 2-1 for Calgary. And then Killam tied it up for Vancouver at 12:32 to make it 2-2. Zach Hayward scored for Calgary exactly 13 minutes. That made it 3-2 for Calgary. And then Lowen scored at 13:55 to make it 3-3. And then Shane Simpson got actually a short-handed goal with 1 second left in the first quarter to make it 4-3. So Calgary had a 4-3 lead going into the first quarter. Second quarter definitely was loaded with offense. Logan Schuss scored on the power play to tie up the game at 4-4 at the 1 minute mark. And then Jesse King scored on a power play to start a 4-0 run for Calgary in goals at 2:57, so it was 5-4 for Calgary. Jesse King scored at 3:21 to make it 6-4 at the second quarter. And then Jesse King scored again at 3:56, so that made it 7-4 for Calgary. And then Tyler Pace got a power play goal at 6:56, so that made it 8-4 for Calgary at that point. However, Vancouver did score 5 of the next 6 goals at this pace. At 7:15, it was Keegan Ball scored, so that made it 8-5 for Calgary. And then Keegan Ball again, first one at 7:15 and 8:53 the second quarter, so that now made it 8-6 for Calgary. However, Escamadas got Calgary on the board at 9:15 to make it 9-6 at that point. I think that was his first goal of the season. And then Vancouver scored 3 straight to wrap up the second half, or the second quarter, first half. Killam at 11:39, that made it 7-9 for Calgary. And then Ryan Lowen at 12:50 to make it 9-8. And then Keegan Ball tied it up at 9 apiece at 13:46, so it was a 9-9 game at halftime. Going to the third quarter, Eli Salama scored the first goal for Calgary at 3:50, so that made it 10-9 for Calgary. And then Keegan Ball got on a power play goal at 5:13 to tie up the game at 10 apiece. And then Keegan Ball scored again for Vancouver at 9:32. So at that point in the third quarter, Vancouver led 11-10. However, Dan Taylor did score at 10:52 to tie up the game at 11 apiece. And then the last goal of the third quarter went to Calgary, as it was Tyler Pace scored at 12:06. So it was 12-11 Calgary going into the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter definitely was a tight one, as Jesse King did score for Calgary at 2:41 to make it 13-11. At that point, Keegan Ball did score for Vancouver at 5:22 to keep it 13-12. Excuse me. And then going into the later part of the fourth quarter, it was Zach Currier who scored for Calgary at 6:58, so that made it 14-12 at that point. And Zach Hayward scored at 11:41, that made it 15-12. But then the closest Vancouver got in this one, as it was Killen who got the goal at 12:54 to make it 15-13, and ultimately the Calgary Roughnecks, they won this one 15-13 to go 4-0 in the month of April so far. And also what also made this game significant for Calgary is actually, if you remember back in 2020, before things got shut down, the league came up with the Alterna Bank Cup, which is a trophy that goes to the Canadian team with the best record when they play against any other Canadian teams. Ultimately, that game clinched the Alterna Bank Cup for the Calgary Roughnecks. So the Calgary Roughnecks won their first Alterna Bank Cup with the best winning percentage with Canadian teams facing off against other Canadian teams. So we definitely swept Saskatchewan and took 2 out of 3 against Vancouver, which definitely helped matters, plus beating Halifax. As Calgary went 6-1 against Canadian teams this season, had the best winning percentage for the Alternative Bank Cup. So shots and goal favored Calgary 55-46. So the game leaders, well, Jesse King had 4 for Calgary, while Keegan Ball had 6 for Vancouver. Assist, well, Curtis Superman Dixon had 6 for Calgary, while Matthew Dinsdale had 5 for Vancouver. Loose balls, actually that went to Tyler Burton, who had 13 for Calgary, while Ray Bowering had 7 for Vancouver. Saves, 33 went to Christian Del Bianco for Calgary, while Steve Fryer had 28 for Vancouver. Caused turnovers, Zach Currier had 4 for Calgary, while Justin Salt had 2 for Vancouver. So when it comes to the leading point getter, well, obviously when it comes to the Calgary Roughnecks, it was Jesse King and Curtis Superman Dixon. Each had 6-point games. Jesse King had 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points, while Curtis Dixon had 6 assists altogether. However, Tyler Pace actually had a big game with 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points. So that's who led the way for the Calgary Roughnecks. So yeah, that was game number 16 as the Calgary Roughnecks are gone 4-0. So I'm going to take a little sip here. I definitely feel anemia as I still got 2 more games to go before we talk about playoffs. As this was a busy April. So next game, this has game 17, the second last game of the regular season. This happened on Friday, April the 22nd, as the Calgary Roughnecks were still on the road as they were taking on the Rochester Nighthawks. This was a 5 p.m. ball drop at the Blue Cross Arena. This game was rescheduled from Saturday, January the 8th, so that's why there was a busier month. If you look at the stands, you're thinking the way the Calgary Roughnecks were playing, and the fact that I wasn't at the game because I didn't go all the way to New York, that this should be an easy game for the Calgary Roughnecks. Well, maybe not, as we'll talk about in this one. First, things did look alright for Calgary, as it was Jesse King who scored on the power play at 2:50 of the first quarter, so they made it 1-0 for Calgary. However, Smith scored for Rochester at 6:23 to tie up the game at 1 apiece. And then Zach Haywire scored a power play goal at 9:10, so that made it 2-1 for Calgary at that point. And then Burke tied it up for Rochester at 13:18 to make it 2 apiece. And then Dan Taylor scored with literally a second left in the first quarter to give Calgary a 3-2 lead, so it was 3-2 for Calgary at that point of the game, so things were still looking good. However, Rochester definitely blew things open in the second quarter, proving that they're out to play an upset. So first, Rochester scored to tie it up at 3 apiece, as Biles tied it up at 1:51, so they made 3-3, and then Bennett scored for Rochester at 4:45, so that made it 4-3 for Rochester. And then Knight scored the next 2 goals for Rochester. First one at 5:02, and then 6:58 on the power play. So that made it 6-3 for Rochester the Nighthawks. At that point, Calgary was able to get one from Curtis Superman Dixon at 12:20. Actually, this was the only goal the Calgary Roughnecks scored in the second quarter. That made it 6-4 for Rochester. However, there was a couple more goals for the Nighthawks, as it was Knight at 13:55 to make it 7-4. And then for Roughneck, Holden Cantoni scored with 3 seconds to go in the second quarter at 14:57 to make it 8-4. So it's 8-4 Rochester Nighthawks at halftime. Could see an upset in the making. Well, in the third quarter, both teams only traded a goal, so upset was looking still more likely. Actually, the first goal did not happen until 8:54 in the third quarter. It was Zach Haywire for Calgary scored on the power play, so that made it 8-5 for Rochester. However, Burke scored at 14:10 in the third quarter to make it 9-5 for Rochester. So it was 9-5 Rochester going into the fourth quarter. However, Jesse King did score early in the fourth quarter in the power play 40 seconds in, so it was 9-6 for Rochester. And then Smith scored the next 3 goals for Rochester at 3:30, 5:56 and 7:24. So at that point of the fourth quarter, it was 12-6 for Rochester, and then Olive got one for Rochester at 10:14, so that made it 13-6. Bring up the Pepto-Bismol for the upset. But then Curtis Superman-Dixon got another goal for Calgary at 12:22. That made it 13-7 for Rochester at that point. However, Hogwarth got the last two goals of the game at 12:47 and 13:09. So Rochester ultimately won this one 15-7, and this was an upset given that they were the worst ranked team in the league. However, after this game, not only were coming into this game, the Calgary Roughnecks actually clinched a playoff spot when they won that game against Vancouver. So I'm not too sure if that played a role, but definitely was very concerning that we dropped this one 15-7 to Rochester. When it comes to shots, it was 50-7, 47 favoring Calgary. So the leading goal game getters, meant to say, is Curtis Superman-Dixon at 2 for Calgary, while Ryan Smith had 4 for Rochester. When it comes to assists, Curtis Superman-Dixon had 5 for Calgary, while Charlie Bernard Burton had 3 for Rochester. Loose balls, Zach Currier had 10 for Calgary, while it was Dan Coates had 16 for Rochester. Saves, Chris Del Bianco made 32 for Calgary, while Joel Watson had 43 for Rochester. Caused turnovers, while Zach Currier still led with 6, while Mitch Olive had 1 for Rochester. So I'm going to say this game is one of those you can just throw it away, as Calgary did clinch a playoff spot. Still was an upset that we did not win that one, as we lost that one fairly convincingly. So that was game 17. Let's move on from that. So game 18, this is the last game of the regular season. This happened on Saturday, April 30th, as the Calgary Roughnecks were back at home, taking on the Colorado Mammoth. And what was on the line for this game was, winner of this game will get to host a playoff game. Guess what? I went to the game. However, I did a few things differently. Knowing the game that we won, I did go into a different entrance. So I made sure I did that for this game, given that a home playoff date was on the line. So I did actually go to that game. Did that make an impact in the game, should I say? As I mentioned, 7 p.m. puck drop at the ball drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. Well, how did things go between Calgary and Colorado? Well, early in this game, Curtis Superman-Dixon actually scored early on the power play 48 seconds in to make it 1-0. As the referees definitely like calling penalties in this game, especially against Calgary a lot more at points. That definitely set the tone, so Calgary had an early 1-0 lead. However, Colorado did score 2 quick goals, thinking, sorry, I was at the game. Well, it was Williams who got the goal on the power play at 3:03. That made it 1-1. And then Eli McLaughlin put Colorado up 2-1 to make it 3:52. So Colorado had an early 2-1 lead at that point. However, Tyler Pace was able to tie it up for Calgary at 4:36, I meant to say. So that made it 2-2 at that point. And then Wardle scored for Colorado not until the 12:50 minute mark to make it 3-2 for the Colorado Mammoth. However, Curtis Superman-Dixon, he definitely heated up here, as he had a big game as he tied it up for Calgary at 13:25 to make it 3-3. So it was 3-3 after the first quarter. Second quarter, definitely was feeling a little better about being at the game, because the Calgary Roughnecks did tear it up, as Curtis Superman-Dixon actually scored the next 4 goals in the second quarter. First one did not come until 7:22. Then at 8:14, 9:51 on the power play, and at 12:02 of the second quarter. So if you were keeping track, that brings Calgary up to 7-3 at that point. And actually, that goal at 12:02 was his 6th of the game for the sock trick. Interestingly, I did not actually wear socks going to this game. I should probably do that for the playoff game, or playoffs, because maybe Curtis Dixon will already take them off for me. But that was at that point, and then Calgary got 2 more goals as they shut out Colorado in the second quarter. It was Tyler Pace at 13:13 to make it 8-3, and Jesse King at 13:51 to make it 9-3. So after 6 goal second quarter, Calgary led 9-3. And then things were still looking pretty good for Calgary in the third quarter. As going to the third quarter, Zach Hayward actually got a short end of goal. As I said, there were definitely a lot of penalties called against Calgary in this one, but Zach Hayward's got a short end of goal at 3:20, so that made it 10-3 for Calgary. And then Robinson got the power play goal in that same penalty at 3:51, so that made it 10-4 for Calgary. And then Eli McLaughlin at 8:48 made it 10-5 for Calgary at that point. And then Calgary got two more goals in the third quarter for going into the fourth quarter. First, it was Hayden Dixon on a power play at 9:58 to make it 11-5. And then Tyler Pace on a power play at 12-11-25. So Calgary had a 12-5 lead going into the fourth quarter. However, things got a little more interesting than it needed to be, I would say, in the fourth quarter. First, Lee scored for Colorado 30 seconds in, so that made it 12-6. And then Kabuto scored 8 seconds later at 38 seconds. So now it was 12-7. There were many people that went out for a quick, break, suddenly saw 2 goals against before they came back. And then Eli McLaughlin scored on the power play at 2:11. That made it 12-8 for Calgary. And then at 2:38, so this was 27 seconds later, Zach Williams scored for Colorado. So now it is 12-9. So suddenly, Colorado was starting to make it a game out of this. Me was getting a little nervous at this point. And then Eli McLaughlin did score for Colorado. Not until 10:31, so things did settle down for most of the fourth quarter. But suddenly, it was 12-10 for Calgary. Did I mention that Calgary was up 12-5 at one point? Now it was 12-10. Then actually Colorado got within 1. As was Wardo at 13-17 to make it 12-11. However, Calgary eventually was able to put away with a couple empty netters, but Colorado definitely pressed really hard in this one, as Eli Salama got his goal at 14:40 to make it 13-11, and then Mitch Wild got one with 2 seconds left at 14:48. So ultimately, Calgary won this one 14-11, but it was definitely a lot more interesting than it needed to be. There were definitely a lot of questionable calls. I think there were definitely too many penalties called on both sides, but ultimately Calgary won this one. So with this win, they actually clinched themselves a home playoff date. So who did the Calgary Roughnecks ultimately play? Well, let's get to that when I get to the stats and standings. So yeah, it was nice to know that we at least won a game that I was at, but I guess I know what entrance I need to go in for the home playoff date. Alright, note that. But the shots and goal, actually Colorado actually outshot Calgary 47-44. The other I forgot to mention in the second quarter that Calgary did score 6 goals there. It was also the fact that Colorado had a few posts. Actually, there were a few posts on both sides, so there could have been a few more goals on both sides in this one. So the game leaders, ultimately, it was Eli McLaughlin, who had 4 for Colorado. It was 6 for Curtis Superman-Dixon for Calgary. Ryan Lee had 5 assists for Colorado, while Jess King had 4 for Calgary. Loose balls, it was Jordan Gillies, who had 8 for Colorado, while Zach Currier had 11 for Calgary. Saves, Dylan Ward had 30 for Colorado, while Chris Del Bianco had 36 for Calgary. Cross turnovers with Chris Rother, who had 2 for Colorado, while Eli Salama had 4 for Calgary. So that was the, like I say, Curtis Superman-Dixon had 8 points, 6 goals, 2 assists for 8 points. Tyler Pace had 3 goals, 3 assists for 6 points. So those were the big point getters for the Calgary Roughnecks. So ultimately, in a very, very busy April, the Calgary Roughnecks, they went 5-1 and ultimately got themselves back in the hunt, made the playoffs, and hosted a playoff game. So ultimately, as we get to the stats and standing part of the video, the Calgary Roughnecks, they finished the season 10-8. They also finished 10-8 in 2019. This put them second in the West Division, and they did win the Alternative Bank Cup champions by having the best record for the Canadian record. So when it comes to who are the top point getters for the Calgary Roughnecks, well, Jesse King lead the team in scoring this season. He had 95 points with 29 goals and 66 assists. And then Curtis Subban-Dixie had 82 points. He had 42 goals, 40 assists. Curtis Dixon led the team in goals of 42. Well, Jesse King led the team in assists with 66. Tyler Pace was third in scoring. He had 67 points, 26 goals, 41 assists. Dan Tiller had fourth at 43 points. He had 17 goals, 18 assists or 18 goals for 25 assists, I meant to say. He played 17 games. And Tanner Crook, the rookie, rounds out the top five. And he has 41 points, 11 goals, and 30 assists. So when it comes to the goaltender, when it comes to the Calgary Roughnecks, well, Christian Del Bianco, I think, definitely looked a lot better towards the second half of the season. He had a 10-8 record. He has a goals against average of 11.04 and a save percentage of 772, which I understood that put him fifth in the league coming into last night's game. So keep in mind, these are lacrosse numbers. So that's the quick stats part. So when it comes to the standings, if we take a look at the standings, this is where everybody finished where and how did the playoff picture shake down. So bring up the standings. So first in the Eastern Conference, the Buffalo Bandits. They ran away, had the best record in the league. They were in first place at 14-4. Second place was the Toronto Rock. They were 13-5. Third place was the Halifax Thunderbirds. They were 11-7. Fourth place was the Albany Firewolves. They were 9-9. And then the Philadelphia Wings. They were fifth place at 99. Sixth place was the Georgia Swarm. They were 99. Then seventh place was the New York Riptide. They were 6-12. And then the Rochester Nighthawks. They were 4-14, last in eighth place. So when it comes to the West, where the Calgary Roughnecks are, there was a three-way tie for 10-8. But ultimately, it was the San Diego Seals, as they won the season series on all these teams. They were first at 10-8. Calgary was second at 10-8. And Colorado is third at 10-8. And then the Saskatchewan Rush was fourth at 8-10. Panthers City Lacrosse were fifth at 11-7. And the Vancouver Warriors were in sixth place at 6-12. And then next season, there'll be a seventh team in the West Division, as Las Vegas will be joining the league. They'll be called the Desert Dogs, I believe. So Las Vegas will be joining the league next year. So how did the playoffs work out is you had the top four in the East make the playoffs, and the top three in the West make the playoffs, plus one wild card spot. So how it happens right now is the playoffs is set up this way, where the quarterfinal matchups, these are all single game eliminations, as the third place in the Eastern Conference will be taking on the second place team in the Eastern Conference. So Toronto will be hosting Halifax. This will be on Friday, May the 6th. And then the Calgary Roughnecks, they will be hosting the Colorado Mammoth. This will be on Friday, May the 6th. That'll be a 7:30 ball drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. So Calgary gets to play Colorado again next week. This is all single game elimination. And then the Buffalo Bandits, they'll be hosting the Albany Firewolves. That'll be on Saturday, May the 7th. And then the San Diego Seals will be hosting the Philadelphia Wings. This will also be on Saturday, May the 7th. So round one, this is the looking ahead. We get to play Colorado in the quarterfinals, single game elimination. So that whoever wins that will move on. I believe everybody gets reseeded for the semifinals. And the semifinals is a best of three, because the best of three semifinals, the first game will be between May 12th to 16th. Game 2 will be May 19th to the 23rd. And if we need a game 3, that'll be May 26th to 30th. So depending on how the Roughnecks do, we might have a few more home playoff games. And then the finals. The NLL Finals is also a best of three. So this time, if you're going to win the championship, you're going to need to win 5 games instead of 4, because the Calgary Roughnecks, they won 4 games to win the championship. In 2019, there were 2 single elimination games. If you remember, we beat San Diego in San Diego to win the semifinal, and then we had a home playoff date hosting Colorado because both the lower seeds won. So we beat Colorado, and then we beat Buffalo in 2 in the best of 3. So the finals would be June 2nd to 6th. That'll be game 1. Game 2 would be June 9th to 13th, and then if necessary, if we need a 3rd and final game, it would be within June 16th to 20th. So the next episode, which I plan to do, will be a playoff episode for my Calgary Roughnecks this month. I won't be doing that until at least after the championship is crowned, regardless if we bring it home or not, but that will be the next episode. So to wrap up this season, I'm going to say definitely was an interesting season to be a Calgary Roughnecks fan. I mean, the season, I felt the experience going to the game overall had declined a bit overall, not because of team performance. Well, ultimately the team performance picked it up in the second half, but the scheduling definitely was inconsistent, but then games got postponed. I'm still not a huge fan of the rebrand. I want the red jerseys back, but I just felt that overall things went down a little, but I think this is also the first, year back from COVID. Because I kind of felt that same thing with the CFL and the Calgary Stampeders this past year, that it was the first season back. The scheduling was inconsistent, and unfortunately I missed 4 games. That was kind of the joke of this episode, that the team seemed to win when I don't go to the games, but I missed a bunch of games because a couple of them got rescheduled, and I still like the Saturday night games better than the Friday night games. But that's, me, but I also get up early for work. But it's just, schedule was inconsistent, but I'd still give her a free pass, but ultimately we're in the playoffs. It didn't look like, I didn't think we were going to make the playoffs, up until March. But I had that same feeling 3 years ago, and we turned it on, and won a few games, realized we were in the playoffs, and ultimately, it was one of the top sports experiences I had was when we won that game at home in overtime against the Buffalo Bandits. Who knows? Maybe history repeats itself again. We're 10-8, just like we were in 2019, and turned it on at the right time, but let's just take it one game at a time, starting with the Colorado Mammoth again on May the 5th. So anyway, that's what I say. If you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, home the Flames, Hitman, Roughnecks, Stampeders, and Calgary FC. If you make sure you hit like, subscribe. I mostly do talk Calgary sports, recap games, stories, and that, but I also do a variety of non-sports content like personal vlogs, attempted comedy, and also do share experience them on the road or a sport event. So if at all sounds like you'd be interested to watch, to follow along with Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I also have my other social links down in the description below for other ways you can follow me. And I do have my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts, where I exclusively put my short form content on there, so I appreciate like, subscribe, both here on my main channel as well as my second channel. But yeah, definitely exciting to have some playoffs. The Roughnecks found themselves the way to get into the playoffs. The Calgary Flames, they're going to be starting their playoff series with the Dallas Stars, and hopefully the Calgary Flames will have more than just a brief cameo in the first round against the Dallas Stars this year and actually go somewhere. I expect them to at least get to the conference championship. When it comes to the Calgary Flames, and now that we're heading into May, Calgary Stampeders season is about to start once again, so there'll definitely be more of those content coming up with the Stanley Cup playoffs, see how the Roughnecks do. The next episode will not come until after the NLL Championship is crowned, so you'll have some time to wait for that episode, and then hopefully, by that time we'll get ready to celebrate a Stanley Cup victory for the Calgary Flames. I can dream, at least. So anyway, I want to say thanks for watching, go Next Go, and I'll see you in the next video.